Good afternoon and welcome to the final session in this Local GovCamp 2020. We've had a really interesting week of interactive, knowledge-packed, and in some cases fun-packed sessions. And I'd like to thank everyone that's participated, attended, hosted sessions, and also our wonderful sponsors for making this event happen. This final session is all around managing emerging technologies to transform services and to share processes. And it's being hosted by Sarah Talbot, who's Head of Emerging Technologies at Swindon Borough Council, and Jill Kudis, who's Lead Data Scientist at Methods. And Swindon Borough Council are going to talk about how they've used emerging technologies to help improve efficiencies for its management of processes and online service delivery. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to both Gilla and Sarah, and thanks once again for attending Local GovCamp 2020. Over to you, Gilla and Sarah.
Thank you. Welcome everyone. Thank you for taking a Friday afternoon, a rainy one, so maybe it's a good one to join us today. Gilla and I are going to take you through where we've worked on emerging technologies and transforming services within Swindon. So hopefully everybody can see my slides okay and hear me clearly. So my name's Sarah Talbot. I lead emerging technology at Swindon Borough Council. And with me today is Gilla. My background, just for context, I spent about 20 years in private sector, so working at companies like Sophos and Dyson, and then took an active decision to move into government. That started with central government and subsequently into Swindon in local authority. So what we're going to look at going through today is an introduction to emerging tech at Swindon. I thought that would be quite useful for people to understand the context and how we stood up the area within Swindon. I've engaged with a number of LAs and I think it's fairly unique to have an emerging tech team. So I thought I'd explain a little bit about how we went about that. And then we'll move on to doing some talking about potholes and fly tipping, which may not seem like the most interesting topic, but actually I'm completely fascinated by everything mattress and fridge related and have been for some time, along with pothole depth. So we'll talk about some of the work that Gilla and I have done in that space. And that uses machine learning and AI, and that was the award piece was mentioned earlier. And then we'll move on to some work around some RPA that we've done for free school meals, the extensibility of each of these pieces of work and what we're looking at next, along with any questions and discussion. So without further ado, we'll move on. In terms of emerging tech, generally it's used to describe a new technology that's developing both in private government and private sector settings. It's usually, you can Google it up and you'll come up with the same type of lines, usually reserved for technologies that are created or expected to create significant social or economic effect and return. I also think in a local government setting, we could kind of say it could be overarchingly used to describe what's out there that government's not using at the moment that could make a real difference to services. And when I think of emerging tech, having come from a private background, I can sit on one line of defence and talk about the whole IoT, serverless piece and NB-IoT and AI and CNNs and et cetera, et cetera. But I think I've learned through working with local government, there's actually a huge gap there around technology that doesn't necessarily have to sit in the traditional ET space that could make a real difference to services. So I've become a little bit more relaxed about the whole what is emerging tech piece. So in terms of Swindon's emerging tech team, We were established about 12 months ago, and Swindon took a unique decision to invest in a team and allow us to work really differently. You know, it's fundamental. We have incredible support. I have incredible support behind me. I was given a little bit of seed funding, and it was a very small amount of seed funding, and a blank page, and off we went. So initially that was me on my own. Subsequently, I've now got 2 people that work with me part-time. And what we do is identify, explore and evaluate emerging technologies. And we have a look at how they can benefit and support SVC in moving towards a more modern, efficient and effective organisation. So the way we work and the way that we've modelled this and established this is we run proof of concept projects, and that really allows us to test technologies, learn more about them, measure the results and share the findings. So we can really work at pace. We work in a very evidence-based way at low cost, and we prove to the authority, to the council, the rest of the council, whether it's worth any further significant investment and resource or not. And that enables us as an authority to make a really informed evidence-based allocation of investment around new technology, you know, rather than taking that deep dive as to whether something will work. So it means we can work in a very agile, different type of way. We don't have the red tape in place that you might see or think of elsewhere within an authority, and it really does allow us to work completely differently, but we have really, really clear evidential based pieces. So I thought it'd be useful to go through how we established, how we work, as well as the results of the work, so you can see what's tangibly coming out of this. So tiny investment, small resource, agile, and you know, when we say agile, it's the traditional sense of running agile, but actually we're turning stuff around within a few months with a few people, and we're measuring week on week and evidencing out where we've got to. And the other thing I wanted to do, having got some amazing and fantastic contacts outside of government, was I wanted to take really a partnership style approach, which for me throughout my career has worked exceptionally well. And I think with you know, public money, we need to spend that wisely and carefully, and we have to be a bit more innovative, not only in the work we're doing, but the style and way in which we do it as well. So we don't have the same funding, and I spend a lot of time establishing carefully nurtured relationships based on transparency and trust. And what we do is co-produce the proof of concept pieces of work as a blended team with our partners, and that really actively supports Swindon in growth and development of quite hard to acquire, top level expensive skills. And it means that we build a really sustainable growth model, and we're investing back in our people. And in terms of relationships, we've got fantastic partnerships in place with Methods, with NDL, AWS, Microsoft and more, and that's building all the time, and that does bring huge value. So I think, you know, that partnership style approach works very well. So we want to maximise the public money that we're using. So every proof of concept, when we start at the beginning of the work and we sit in our big cloud thinking space, we think about the extensibility opportunities as well. So ways in which we can reapply that work across pattern services and through that kind of componentized development, and where we can creatively repurpose. So it's not just about exploring the technology, but it's also exploring where else that could apply within the council, so that we really make the most of that and get best value. So not just at Swindon, but also for the benefit of other local authorities. So, you know, if we've been very fortunate to have the support and backing to go ahead and do things differently and try some of these new things, we want to make sure that we're able to help others learn from that and use that. So this forms part of our commitment to the local digital declaration. Every single piece of work we do is absolutely available to anybody else. We're happy to share the skills and knowledge, the results, all of the project information, the source code with other authorities. We don't want you having to start from scratch. You know, why should we do that? So it's all available to share. And not just within the UK. So, you know, every country has potholes and fly tipping and graffiti. And I'm actively in discussion with people in Germany, in Dubai, in Australia, as well as a number of people in the UK about sharing the work, which is amazing. And we use Jadu as a lot of our front end piece in terms of taking information from citizens. So there's a number of forms that's used through the work, and we'll also be sharing the work through the Jadu library as well. So potholes and fly tipping, something I've lived and breathed for a number of months now and absolutely love. We had a discussion, or I had a discussion with our head of highways initially about potholes, and is there anything technology-wise you can do to help that? And we love a good challenge, and potholes is something we can all get together on. It's nearly as great as talking about the weather. So we had a conversation around potholes and decided to do some quick discovery work, grabbed everybody in a room. I apologise, there is, believe it or not, an awful fly. There we go, got rid of it. So we talked about potholes, a couple of hours discovery work, and that was incredible because we discovered very, very quickly not all potholes are the same, and actually they have quite a lot of complexities that you wouldn't think about, and depth is one of them. And depth is difficult, and Jill is going to talk about that a little bit more in a moment. So potholes went off the agile piece for the moment. It needs a little bit more time and effort, but we've made some incredible steps. Jill has done some incredible work, and he'll show you some of that in a moment. Subsequently, we then didn't want to let go of our technical ideas, so we looked at fly tipping. It was a great use case, great business problems, and then we went through from conversation to delivery in under 3 months. So we looked at all the technical aspects, did voice of the customer, work with our citizens, did some quick planning, looked at the extensibility opportunities, did our development sprints with the service, so walking down to the fly tip guys weekly to show them what we were doing and get them used to it. Went live during the height of COVID. We saw a 54% increase in fly tipping during the time that the household waste and recycling centres were closed. It's still at higher levels month on month, although the waste and recycling centre has now since reopened. And we measured and shared the results against baseline data week on week and shared that out with stakeholders. And this has now actually gone from concept through to production, so it was signed off by the business as something that has added great value, and yeah, we're moving to production at the moment. So over to you, Gilla.
Cool, thank you, Sarah. Seems like flies are making the news this week, so same fly as the vice presidential debates. Hi everyone. So my name is Gilla Kudus. I'm a lead data scientist at Methods. So I guess what I'm most interested in is how we can apply data science and artificial intelligence techniques to transform reactive public services to proactive, consent-based, channel-agnostic offerings. So we worked with Swindon Borough Council since 2019 now, and we quickly identified a common service pattern, as Sarah mentioned, so the report it common service pattern. So whether you're a local organisation in the UK, America, China, Australia, what have you, they all have to deal with potholes, graffiti, fly tipping, and what have you. And at the moment, that pattern is very reactive. So you depend on members of the public to report these case types, whether through an online form or more recently through mobile apps, but it's still it's a very reactive relationship. So the hypothesis was, could we use artificial intelligence to transform this service from one that's reactive to proactive? So what we developed in conjunction with Swindon Borough Council was an artificial intelligence prototype. So the idea behind this prototype was to train a neural network that we then embedded within an Android mobile application. We then mounted a smartphone onto a dashboard of an existing council vehicle, and then we drove around Swindon to see if we could identify potholes, in this case, in real time. So Sarah's going to play us video now. That is the actual video when we drove around Swindon in November 2019. And as you can see in the video, as we're driving around, the AI system is proactively detecting potholes as we drive along. It does make a few mistakes, so it has identified a couple of cars and billboards as potholes, but on the whole, it's performing very well. So every time it detects a pothole, it will draw a blue square around it, and every detection event, a report is then created in the back-end case management system, in this case being Jadu. So the mobile application is also integrated with live GPS services on the phone. So again, every detection event will also get in not only the image, but also the real-time longitude and latitude. And this helps the Swindon street cleaning teams, because one of the problems we saw as a result of our user research was that it can take a long time for them to locate a case that a member of the public has reported, because the location, which is generally a free text field, can be quite vague. So someone might say, you know, somewhere along the, I don't know, some road, and that road could be kilometers long. So the live GPS location services really helps to solve that user problem. And the final thing, a couple of final things to note on the AI system. So in terms of its performance, it was comparable to human brain performance in terms of the ability for it to detect things in real time. Obviously, this is just one use case. The human brain is doing loads of things at the same time to keep us alive. So this is just one use case, but the performance is comparable. And also, obviously, if we're driving around, we might lose internet connection at some point. So the data is locally cached on the device. And when the internet connection is restored, again, all that data is then sent to the underlying council case management system. Can you go on to the next slide, please, Sarah? Cool. So you saw on the previous slide that we are now detecting proactively potentially hundreds of potholes every day. And this can be extended to fly tipping and graffiti and other case types as well. So the challenge is, that's great that we're detecting these additional potholes, but how do we actually go from detection to actionable detection, i.e. something that I've learned over the last few months, having become an expert in potholes along with Sarah, is that not all potholes are made equal. So I think this is a graphic, the top two graphics are from, I believe, the Devon County Council website, whereby they will only action a pothole to repair if it exceeds a certain depth, in this case 4 centimeters, and it exceeds a certain width, in this case 30 centimeters. Otherwise, they will log it in their case management system and just keep an eye on it. So the challenge is, our AI system is detecting all these potholes. It's then sending back images and location data. How can we then use that image data to see whether that pothole meets the criteria for it to be repaired, i.e. does it meet the depth and width requirements. So as it turns out, this is a very hard challenge because you can't estimate dimensions purely from an image. You need some reference point or reference dimension. And without that, it's very hard. So I guess the next component on the pipeline is, given an image, can we use the contents of the image to try and guesstimate the depth of the pothole? So this is a piece of work that we started and we certainly haven't finished, but as a research theme, what we tried to understand was, could we use the color distribution of the image to, again, estimate the depth of the pothole? And as it turns out, there's some quite interesting insights. So the image on the left is a pothole, and you can see just very visually that there's a changing color gradient between the surface of the pothole and then the actual where the rainwater is collected in this case. So there are clues that allow us to estimate how deep it is, and we can then use things like surface plots and contour plots that essentially plot the distribution of the color in the images, the pixels in the image, to again try and estimate the depth of the pothole. So then, using this additional image processing insight, we can then plug that on to the end of the AI system to say, not only are we detecting hundreds more potholes every day, which is great, but we can also say which ones are actionable, i.e. which ones are more than 4 centimeters deep. So that's quite exciting. So like I said, this is an ongoing research theme, but I think the potential is significant, and it can be applied to not only potholes, but for example, graffiti. So if we're detecting graffiti in real time, can we say whether it contains content that might be inappropriate, so inappropriate symbols, for example. With fly tipping, again, can we try and guesstimate the size of the overall fly tipping based on the image? So it really is extensible to all other case types as well. Back to you, Sarah, I think.
Thank you. Thanks, Gilla. So yeah, like Gilla says, we're not about to be beaten by a pothole, not any day soon. So while they have their complexities and we quickly moved on to fly tipping, potholes are something that are not going to get forgotten about. So in terms of the fly tipping problem and moving back to that, just to understand the type of issue that we did have as our use case to move on to. So we have a street smart team. They have an excess of 300 fly tipping cases a month, and the types of problems they experience were, for example, we have an area called the Ridgeway, which is very wide, open landscape, rural area. And when a citizen reports fly tipping there, and they say, oh, there's tyres on the Ridgeway, our team are faced with problems of not knowing the number of tyres or the type. So whether it's 1 car tyre, whether it's 50 tractor tyres, and the miles of this open space, whereabouts on the Ridgeway are they? So we can see, and you can see immediately, the types of issues and difference in how the team needs to respond and manage that. And quite often for them, that resulted in multiple visits, sometimes unable to locate items, and sometimes needing assistance from highways with bigger vehicles. So the main problems for our team was the kind of accurate locational data, but also, you know, what are we dealing with? So in terms of what Gilla and I worked on, along with a couple of others, so we were a small team of 4. This shows you the kind of technical pathway and process through. So we have the resident that reports fly tipping online. And what we're doing is using geospatial tools to get the locational data logged and then analysed, so we know exactly the longitude and latitude of the location of the problem. That goes through to the supervisor within the Street Smart team. They have visualisation for the fly tip reports, and we also have visualisation for citizens, so we're not relogging entries. Another problem that the service had is that people were reporting items that had already been reported. The service were able to look at all the different types of fly tipping items, so whether it's tyres, fridges, hypodermic needles, and drug equipment, various other bits and pieces. And each item can be dealt with differently, and obviously has different volumes and space. So they look at what route they want to take. We've loaded in route optimization and auto directions within there. So they select the cases they're going to deal with today. We can see those by type, by how old the cases are. The resident, when they report, can include an image. So we're doing image recognition through that as well. So the image recognition can classify whether we're looking at mattresses, fridges, tyres, and that connects up to, would you believe it or not, a US Army data set, because apparently they shift lots of things. And it was one of the best sources that could be found in terms of dimensional sizes of mattresses, fridges, freezers, weights, their volume. So that goes through to the operatives, who are then allocated fly tips to go and collect. So they now know which items they're collecting, the exact location of them, photographs of the images assessed for volume and weight dimension. That helps us maximise the van fill load, so that they're not going to the household waste and recycling any more than they need to, and then they get their optimised route for collection. So they have a tablet they go out with. They can evidence through photographing collection and updating the cases actioned while they're out and about on the road, which they absolutely love. You know, and this is a team that before we were engaged with them didn't even have an email address. So I'm super impressed at their ability to go from, you know, no tech at all to using all of this. It's incredible. So they pick up the waste, the evidence that they update the case that goes through to the household waste and recycling centre. If they find evidence, that goes through to our enforcement team, and then off of that we've been doing hotspot trend analysis around our fly tipping to understand that better and start looking at potentially predictive models in the future. So I think it's quite nice to see how we've done that through an end-to-end process. And this is the lovely Dave and Dom, two of the guys that we've been working with in the Street Smart team, and they're incredible. Gilla was very fortunate to get steel toe cap boots and a high vis on for a day and go out on the ground with them to experience what the problems are like. But they've just been completely amazing, and this was them with the tablet and going out live with all the tasks, and they love it. They say it's truly empowered and changed the way that they work, and yeah, they're amazing in my mind. And then in terms of the results and showing, you know, tangible benefits around this work, we delivered this during the height of COVID. We've supported it during the height of COVID creatively. So one of my team followed the van when they went live and was shouting instructions of which things to press on the tablet while they were out and about. So it was definitely one of the most interesting go lives we've done in terms of trying something. And you know, and we have seen this, you know, on average 54% increase in fly tipping. What the end result for us has been, and we trialled it through an 8-week live period, but as I said, it's gone into production and they're using it still now, is an 83% uplift in their efficiency, and that's not taking into account the additional weighting of cases where we've seen the increase. So an incredible efficiency uplift for that team. we're seeing constantly increasing use of photos now that we're able to message out to citizens around the value that that brings to us in knowing what we're dealing with and being able to estimate the volumes of that and the types of fly tips. So we're around 55-ish% of cases with photos now, compared to where we were previous, and hopefully that will continue. In terms of our citizens, we did some survey feedback again all the way through the trial, and the processes and the way that operations are carried out, that has a 98% good to great rating. We've got 83% using the geospatial tools and the maps to locate for us where the fly tips are, and like I say, that also brings us great evidence to work on in terms of other work in the future. And the Street Smart team, yeah, Dave and the team say it's transformed the way that they work. So got a lot of love for those guys. We're going to go back to them at some point. I think there's graffiti and a number of other things we can do. So moving on to another piece of work then, we did some work with our free school meals team. So we wanted to have a look at robotic process automation, and this is something whereby it's not necessarily emerging tech right now, but there's lots of local authorities that aren't using this yet, and we wanted to have a look at Swindon about how this might help in terms of efficiency of processes. So robotic process automation, RPA, is a little piece of software to emulate actions of one of our members of staff who use a system. So it lives inside a little server. It's actually called Munchie now. We've had it named by we did a competition. So yeah, we've now got Munchie the robot, and it can do, or they can do, tasks that humans are prone to finding dull, where mistakes happen and don't really add value to. And if a rule can't be followed, then the robot flags it up. So there's loads of benefits here. It works 24/7, 365, 0 mistakes, and speed-wise 6 to 9 times faster than a person. So with our free school meals piece, this was delivered in just under 2 months, a team of 4. We connected with heads of service around use case candidates across the business. Determined free school meals would be a great one to go with, and that was actually just pre-COVID. Did all of our work, but actually as we were going through, we saw a massive spike in applications, COVID happening, and we sped up our trials. Again, we've gone from proof of concept now into production. So during COVID, we had a 2000% spike increase in free school meals. So we did accelerate this piece of work, having seen that. But we have a parent or carer who applies for our front end Jadu form system. And then we had an officer that was manually checking the eligibility against the Department for Education portal, and then updating our internal Capital One children's system. And they sent out letter confirmations to the parent care applicant and also to the school. And this particular process, like many others within the council, is something where you've got people taking information from one system to another through copy and paste and other methods. It's really important for us to deliver the service, but the person processing the information doesn't decide anything, doesn't change the outcome. They're literally, doing a process of tasks. The COVID increase, the 2000% increase there, had a massive pressure on the service, and it was a time where people were in really vulnerable positions, and that could have added potential delays, hence the acceleration of this work. So just to take you through the map of the work on this one, so the parent care applies online. The application is sent through a central mailbox. We now put that into a SQL database, and then Munchie comes into gear and says, ha, there's a new application, and starts processing. So Munchie goes off to the Department for Education, logs on to the online portal, checks the eligibility status. Munchie will recheck every day if universal credit isn't yet confirmed in place. And that was a task that the team before were doing manually for every day for up to a 6-week period. Munchie then goes into Capita. The children's system performs various validation checks against school names, parent-child information, creates the application, generates the letter and the information for the school. We also have an exceptions database, so Munchie will place things into exception, and that's where the value of the officer comes into play. And that could be that the parent carer has accidentally put something incorrect on their application, or some detail needs to be cross-checked. So if Munchie's not making any decisions at all, they are literally processing. And they're a very good bot, and they go and put things into a little exception area if they feel that a person needs to take a look at that and qualify. And let's say that the officer makes the phone call, gets the information clarified, they log that within that little exception database, and Munchie sees the change, and then off they go and reprocess. And again, we've got data there, so we're looking at trends and other information off the back end of that as well. So in terms of tangible results and the trial conditions, so like I say, during the height of COVID, we had begun the development, saw the massive increase, accelerated the work. So it's taken us from 1,800 and 52 cases, 578 hours worth of work, which is now 9.6 hours. And that 9.6 hours of work, which is a, 98.3% efficiency of where we were before, that's just the exceptions management work that we're doing now. So, we've now got 568 extra hours for that service. And those staff to focus on what they're really hired to do. So complex queries serving the public, and in particular, this is a service that cross a number of business areas. So it means we can really, apply their value across other services. So we're now looking, as I'm sure everybody would in these circumstances, about how we can extrapolate that across a number of different processes. So we can have a little digital workforce helping us out. In terms of, the benefits with this, we've made it really much easier for the parents and carers to claim. We've got that kind of accelerated request to fulfillment time for some of the most vulnerable children, and, at some of the most vulnerable times for people. Because we haven't got people managing the data, there's reduced risk around data privacy incidents. That's Munchie now doing all of that work. And we've taken away that kind of valuable resource on low value work, and we're reinvesting it. And in addition to the data quality, there's fewer exceptions, and we are now in a position where we can better respond to unprecedented demand and share the resource across other really key areas, which at the moment, that resource is valuable in helping in lots of other areas. So in terms of what's next, I'm currently working with a number of other service areas, so doing some work with elections, waste enforcement as a follow-on to the work Gilla and I have done with the Street Smart team, so looking at going from collection to enforcement work, household waste and recycling, housing, corporate finance, and anything and everything in between. It says here, we're exploring areas such as sentiment analysis. We've actually done sentiment analysis. We delivered that work again during COVID. We thought it would be really interesting to have a look at the kind of thoughts and feelings of our citizens during that time, and whether their views on services had differed, and how we communicate, and how we direct services, and how people see those needing to change. So we've been doing lots of sentiment analysis work using a whole variety of sources and qualifiers. So that's interesting. I'm also currently doing some work across traffic adapted lighting, so looking at data feed traffic patterns to then change our kind of CMS and LED lighting behaviours, and that uses some narrowband IoT, looking at digital twins, so a digital twin per town, physical robotics, which Gilla knows about, and he and I need to get on this one, but we're totally up for that. But we're looking, I really want to look at physical robotics as a positive way of supporting people with significant physical disabilities in being empowered through the workplace and contributing to the economy. So that's one of my passionate ones there, and it's totally up for that one. Also things like blockchain, smart PPE wearables, and things like COVID related detection and compliance. So things like using AI to monitor distancing and whether people are wearing mask safe equipment, etc. So you know, plus more. It's never ending. So thank you so much for taking a little bit of time on Friday afternoon to spend with Gilla and I, and yeah, we'll take any questions.
That was excellent. Thank you, Gilla. Thank you very much, Sarah. There are a number of questions, of which I have been cutting and pasting them. So are you able to tie in the reactive reports from residents with the proactive reports to avoid duplication of any effort? I think that's around the pothole detection.
Yeah, I can take that one. Yes. So especially if both the reactive report, if it includes accurate location information, the proactive report will contain accurate location information, so we can deduplicate using that data as well. And yes, and that was one of the things we were focused on during the prototype as well, in terms of how to deal with duplicate caseloads.
Excellent. Is there an expectation that this pothole detection solution will be rolled out to the fleet of council vehicles, I guess, sort of ensuring that all, or as much of the council's roads are sort of cut as possible? So
yeah, I mean, it makes complete sense to multitask up our workforce. So when we did that original work, it was actually while we were out with the fly tipping team, even though it was looking at the highways pothole information. So yeah, there's definitely something about maximising services across multiple potential uses.
Excellent. Another one actually was quite good was, are there any plans to use predictive AI analysis to prevent potholes before they appear?
So this was something I was interested in. So no plans at the moment. Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, but something I am interested in is using other data sets and combining them to understand if we can predict potholes before. Yeah. So an hypothesis might be that, you know, if there's any road work,
there's particular conditional types. Yeah,
it will be quite interesting to examine, well, do potholes appear after X number of days or weeks after some roadworks, for example, or weather conditions,
or traffic patterns, where we're looking at that with the LED lights, you know, that kind of source data feed sets into them looking at contributing factors.
And the other thing to add to that is using the existing system that we just showcased. Even if a pothole that has been detected that doesn't meet that depth criteria, assuming the same pothole then reappears when the vehicle is then driving around the next day, for example, we could monitor over time how it's changing as well. And that could be another predictive feature in terms of how potholes evolve over time,
Yeah.
and use that as additional analysis.
Excellent, thank you. Jez, do you want to unmute and ask your question live, as it were?
Thanks, Nick. I think Sarah might have answered it a bit later on, but my question really was on the slide when you were talking about fly tipping, and you were saying that people abandoned tyres on the Ridgeway, and one of the problems was knowing how many tyres and where they were. And then in the workflow, you kind of identified that the resident reports it, then you've got the location for it, and then it kind of carried on through. And I was just interested what the bit was between the resident, what's changed between the way the resident reports it and you knowing where the location is, because you kind of skimmed over that.
Yeah, so beforehand, the resident just needed to put in a location, and that was fairly free text, which made it really difficult for the Street Smart team, was, let's say, down an alley on a very long road. And in fact, the week that we went to meet with Dave and the team first round, they had a person that reported and the street didn't even exist. So we phoned the person up and said, oh, could you tell us? Oh no, that's just the name I call the street, because I don't know what its proper name is. So we had all interesting ways that you know, people were logging the location. And so there's a combination now. We've got basically when the citizen says, I want to report fly tipping, we take them to our geospatial map, so a map of the town, and we say, right, click here to let us know the location. And within that, our geospatial specialist, we've got all the boundaries. We know which is council owned, which is publicly owned, which is privately owned properties. We know where we can auto allocate cases out to parishes, for example, where they've got responsibilities that's not being done manually. And then we can, when locational data is turned on from images, take the location data from the images submitted as well. So,
have you managed to do that in an accessible way? Because that's the challenge with maps, is making them accessible to disabled users.
I would probably need to get our web team to help me answer that one a little bit better, but our web team normally support us around accessibility.
Something we're juggling with at the moment, so just interested to hear.
Yeah. I can. You know, if you wanted to leave your details, I'm happy to put you in touch with the person on our side that supports me around that. But they, you know, they kind of review all of our work in terms of accessibility beforehand. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And somebody asked which, I think it's David Baird, asked which RPA software did you decide to use?
We decided to go with a company called NDL. I went to a robotics session. I actually did the bot based on my old school typing skills being reasonably good, but it's fair to say I didn't beat the bot, so was impressed. But yeah, we went with an RPA tool through NDL, and the reason that we selected, or I selected NDL, was actually it's got really rich under the hood functionality and rich applicability. And so one of the other areas I was looking at was systems integrations between legacy tools, which is something that the authority, you know, has got a number of legacy systems. We need to transfer information. Historically, that's always been through supplier integrations. That takes quite a lot of time and quite a lot of money. And I've just done one of those integrations within children's services between two systems. We did go out and get the suppliers to quote, because I wanted to take a look at whether I could beat with the bot. And so the supplier quotes came back at 12 months worth of work at a 3-figure number. And I've delivered the same thing in 10 days, under 5% of the cost. So yeah, so the NDL toolkit for me was one that not only could do the RPA piece, but actually it could kind of cover that big gap that authorities have around integration as well. So
excellent, thank you. Do you have any more questions for either Gilla or Sarah? Feel free to unmute yourself. Or have they answered everything that you need to know? It seems like you've answered everything that people seem to need to know.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that's it. 10 out of 10.
Sorry, it's David Baird here.
Oh, hi, David.
Yeah, sorry.
I spoke
I
too
was going
soon.
to ask the question, then I was, then I wasn't, now I am. So, yeah, sorry, I work for Southwark Council, and yeah, lots of the case studies and everything you've got there are very familiar and things we could sort of looking to tackle now as well. I just wondered, with your seed funding, did that give you a pot of cash in order to be able to manage these POCs of your choosing, or have you had to go through lots of governance and red tape in getting these approved through lots of gateways and so on?
No gateways, no red tape. So yes, seed funding was a small pot of money for me. My COO and head of digital, who's my manager, I have nothing but complete praise for them in how they support me, you know, pushing shoulders, doing things differently and ripping up the red tape all along the way, and they allow me to do that. So, you know, I do present at LAG, I can engage with our council members. I'm really fortunate the seed funding sits with me directly. I don't go through business cases, I don't go through gateways, I don't go through the typical procurement exercises. So I'm really fortunate. I am truly allowed to also be innovative, as well as the technology element. You know, I think some of the stuff as well that probably I haven't said much, too much about is the extensibility of the work as well. I touched on it early, but you know, in terms of the reported work that Gilla and I have worked on, you know, we identified up front at least 30 other pattern services that can get replicated across. You know, and when we talk about the seed funding and ways of working, you know, that 30 pattern services, that's less than 3 hours work, and it's around £15 a month in terms of some of the image work to replicate that. So it is really low cost, replicable, and really high value returns. So does that help answer your question, David?
It does. I'm somewhat jealous, but yeah, it's it does sound like a really sort of, well, fitting with the whole agile methodology, actually applying that to the way you're working in terms of the financing as well, just to get things off the ground and improve these bits and pieces.
Yeah, I mean, we do a 7-step process. So literally we do a bit of kind of use case, you know, business problem comes to us, some kind of visionary thinking, some very quick kind of light touch POC planning. We do the agile development very closely, you know, with the services involved, put it out, you know, kind of train them up, put it out into trial. We do the baseline measurements as we go, and then the ongoing measurements and evidence. And then I present a results report back out to the business and say, you know, these are the results. Do you want to put this into production, or do we put it on the shelf, maybe pick it up another time, or say actually it didn't return what we thought it would return?
Right. Okay. Can I ask another question?
Yeah.
That's okay. Well, actually, 2 quick questions. One is, will the slides be available? Because they're a really handy set of slides that be.
Yeah, very happy to share the slides. Yeah, I've also got one on that 7-step process around the kind of methodology model that we work to. So anything like that that's useful, I'm happy to share.
Thank you. And the other one was just around pitfalls. So obviously you've had some successes sort of borne out by the numbers you presented. Has there been any pitfalls or ones that haven't gone quite as well as you'd hoped?
Well, I guess potholes is one that Gilla and I are never going to give up on. So, you know, potholes definitely had complexity around the analysis of them, and it's just a bit of a longer term, you know, longer burning one. It wasn't something that we could turn around very quickly. So I wouldn't say it was necessarily a pitfall, but it did show that we could pivot really quickly, thinking wise, from one business problem to a very similar patterned problem, which meant that thinking and small pre-work we'd done hadn't been wasted, and was applicable to shift, and we didn't need to stop. Yeah, didn't expect potholes to catch us out so well within a couple of hours, but we're not ones to give up. And I guess the other one that was interesting is probably sentiment analysis. I really wanted to get that sense of feeling from citizens around services and behaviours across the borough, and how that changes, and to take different sources. And Twitter got me out of it, because they changed the way that their data set was, and they took all the geospatial tagging off of it, which I found a bit frustrating, because I wanted to do it by locational data, but you can't have everything. So yeah, so we did some really good stuff, but you can work with what you can at the time. But other than that, I would say it's been amazing. I've been so impressed with the engagement from the business, actually, because I do push boundaries, and I do make people think a bit differently and a bit creatively. But what's been great for me is, in the 12 months we've been doing this, there are people now actively knocking at the door and queuing up for us to come in and have a look at their service. So it's gone from us thinking of some interesting ideas to everyone having loads of interesting ideas now.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thanks, David. Do we have any more questions? We've got time. I've extended the session slightly so that we can take more questions.
Just
Paul.
Yeah, a quick one for me. No questions. Just very impressed, actually, with the innovative approach that you've taken to doing this work. Very interesting presentation.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Excellent. Thanks, Paul. Well, if we don't have any more questions, I'd like to. Well, it's up to you. But if you want to unmute, I think the last session, not only because it's the last session, but also because of the quality of the content, certainly deserves a round of applause. So I certainly will. Good. That's what we want to hear.
Oh, thank you.
Fantastic. That was wonderful. Thank you very much indeed, Sarah and Gilla, for a wonderful piece of content and conversation and interaction with the attendees for the final session of this Local Gov Camp 2020. I will be making all the videos available next week. I will chase Sarah up around her slides and that additional slide on her 7 steps process. But I'd just like to say thank you very, very much. Oh yes, is Matt going to play us out with something? You're muted.
I'm mute, of course.
Yeah.
I'm a one-finger synthesizer player, so no.
Unfortunately not. Maybe next time we shall coerce Matt into playing. Maybe we'll get Matt to maybe compose a Local Gov Camp theme tune for next time. But that'll be for next time. So once again, thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Gilla. Excellent. Thank you, attendees, for being an engaging bunch and asking questions. Have a wonderful evening, a wonderful weekend, and I'll catch up virtually with hopefully most of you very, very soon. So if you want to unmute yourselves and put yourself on video, let's have a wave goodbye. Yeah, take care, everyone. Stay safe. See you, everyone. And I'm about to end the session.
Bye. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, see you all.
Cheers. Bye.
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 Bye-bye.